Welcome back to the One Question Leadership Podcast. I'm Glenn Caruso, head football coach at the University of St. Thomas, and so happy you tuned in. You know, quite often we get so caught up in the daily grind of work or coaching or recruiting that we don't often take time to reflect. I would encourage everybody to take just a few minutes each day to try and see the bigger picture, to stop and realize that in the end, we're going to be judged on what we choose to believe, who we choose to love, and what we decide to leave behind in the hearts and minds of not just our players, not just our coworkers, but also our children. And remember, if we're doing it right, we're coaching football for life.
Greetings, this is Ty Brown, and welcome to the One Question Leadership Podcast, where we highlight executive and organizational leadership. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at 1Q Leadership. Our guest today is Kirk Herbstreit. Kirk is a college football analyst for ESPN. Greetings, Kirk. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, happy to be with you.
Now, Kirk, of course, you're former student athlete, played at Ohio State, and you've been in broadcasting for roughly 27 years, but 25 of those years, coming up on 25 years, broadcasting with ESPN in college football. So you have a wealth of experience in terms of talking to many people, giving opinions, and talking about a lot of things that have to do with football. So I'm glad to have you on here. I just have a couple questions for you here in terms of this year. Of course, you know, the pandemic chapter of American history, or of recent American history, has an effect on all of us. And I think a lot of us saw your thoughts on the 2020 college football seasons in terms of college football and professional football. And there's some validity to them. Of course, a lot of people who work in college athletics or people who may listen to this podcast weren't happy about them, but it's one of the realities we may have to face, right? And I've talked to a couple people on the podcast about that, and the ramifications are great if there is no football season. And of course, the effects on college athletics may be a bit more drastic than the effects that will be on the NFL. But I do wonder, from your perspective, you're kind of a conduit, right, to the fans of college football in terms of translating, in terms of talking about things, giving opinions, in terms of analyzing games. There's a lot that you provide in terms of working for the media. I wonder what the short-term and long-term ramifications to the passion of the sport, right? As people get into that habit of working from home and not having live sports for extended periods of time can be a benefit, or it could be a detriment to the sport, especially if it continues on through the end of the year. Talk about your thoughts on the ramifications of passion for the sport.
First, I'm just going to go back to that interview. I was on spring break with my wife and 4 boys. I have 2 in college that are actually walk-ons at Clemson. And so it was ironic that everybody's spring break happened to hit on the same week. So we were excited about being able to take our boys on spring break. Well, we had to cut it short because everything was going crazy, like on Tuesday or Wednesday of that week. So when I got home, like everybody else, I started, and this is unprecedented, right? I'm watching TV, and this new character that I watch on TV, at that time it was one of the first or second nights, it's Dr. Fauci, and I'm listening to him, like whatever he says, I'm doing. He says lock it down, we're locking it down. And so I one day goes by, another day goes by, and I'm just listening to this stuff. And I did this interview after I cut my spring break short, and the way it was reported was very misrepresentative of how I said it. I just happened to say it. I was doing an interview with a friend of mine, and it was at 10 o'clock at night. It was about the second day of the pandemic quarantine. And I was just kind of thinking out loud, almost like, man, this is real. Like, this is not stay in your house for a week. I was like, at this point, I don't know how you control this thing. I don't know how we get our arms around this without some kind of vaccine. My point was, I don't know how Roger Goodell or the NCAA is going to be able to greenlight the football season. Well, how can you let guys practice and lift weights and share a locker room and all the things that you do as a team, let alone letting fans in the fans? This was like the first or second day. I was just thinking out loud. And the next day it was just like, Herbstreit says there won't be football. And I was like, whoa, no. I mean, man, nobody wants football more than me. I mean, I hope it, and everyone got upset, and ADs were calling me out and coaches. And I'm like, man, this is really misrepresentative of how I said it and what I meant. I was just trying to make a point about how serious this is. I wasn't declaring that there wouldn't be a football season. So now, 2 weeks later, after talking to a number of people in the know and kind of the decision makers, I can tell you, and you probably are privy to these same conversations, that as far as the NCAA, because I'm not in the NFL circles, but the NCAA is concerned, these decision makers are doing anything and everything in their power to try to be safe first and foremost for the student athletes, but try to figure out, is there a way to salvage a football season? Is it, hey, no problem, we're going to start on schedule, 2 days in August, start in late August, early September, and away we go? Is it that? I mean, I think they're building basically 4 contingency plans, where it's on time, it's pushed back a month, it's pushed back to a December start, or it's pushed back to like a February, March start, where it becomes almost a spring sport with the bowl games in June and the national title in early July, which is crazy. But that's how desperate I think the NCAA would be willing to go to that measure to try to pull off having college football. So as far as the answer to your question, that just gives you background on how I did that interview and kind of where I am today after talking to a lot of these folks. I still think we're all waiting to see how the back end of the curve is and all these things that are so unpredictable. So we're all kind of waiting to see how the country reacts and how this virus treats the American public to be able to decide ultimately if they're going to have a season or not. But I'm much more encouraged based on what Dr. Fauci is saying about the possibility of a vaccine, pushing it back to spring if it comes worst case to that. I think for now we're all just kind of in limbo. I think probably you and your family, me and my family, most people out there were some have scared about whether it's your own family or your parents or people that that you maybe aren't in touch with. You're hopeful that they're going to be okay. The other part of me is, man, I've always loved sports, but I didn't maybe realize how much I love sports because it's like my entire life. And I'm sitting here watching the 1985 World Series, and I'm watching anything I can find because I'm just a consumer, and I miss sports desperately. And to imagine not having MLB or NHL playoffs or NBA playoffs or, God forbid, the NFL or college football or high school football, I just can't even fathom that, right? So I think people are, once everything is green lighted and we're okay, I think the long-term effects will be very, very minimal as far as the passion. I think if anything, the passion will become even greater because of a newfound appreciation for what was been taken away from us.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting, the story you gave. I worked for a long time with the American Football Coaches Association. And one of the things, and you know this, working in the area you work with coaches, it's like you have to make sure you say what you need to say when you're talking to the media, because they will take a snippet of it and run away with it, and it would be completely out of context. Goodness. That is hilarious.
And ever since there's social media, really the internet age, that what I would consider the clickbait internet era that we live in, if you can take Grant Taft's name and put it, Grant Taft says this in a headline.
Right.
What? Grant Taft said what? And then people click on that. And then you read the article and you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad.
Right.
But they got you with that title.
Click. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And so once for me in my career, got to a point where people were interested in what I had to say, you become somewhat of a polarizing figure. So if they can use your words in a way to create a story, then they're definitely going to take their opportunity to do that. And if anybody would have heard the interview and the way I said it and the tone that I've spoken with for 25 years now, I am not a beat on the desk kind of guy. I'm not I want to be the story kind of guy. Never have been, never will be. It's just not my thing. But it was reported by many like I was trying to add to the hysteria or add to the fear, which is the last thing that I was trying to do. I was just talking to a buddy on ESPN radio and just kind of, like I said, thinking out loud, like, bro, like this stuff's real. This is scary. It was more of that kind of tone as opposed to, standing up on the top of, like I said, a mountain saying there will not be football in 2020. That's not what I was trying to say.
What's interesting is, like you, I was a student athlete in Michigan State. Of course, you're Ohio State, Big Ten guys, and you think about the passion that we have for the sport as former athletes, right? But then you think about the passion that the consumers, the people who see it as entertainment or more than entertainment in their lives, and to go without it so long. I like what you said, that the passion will build up because it'll definitely come back, whether it be this 2020 or it be some point in 2021. It'll definitely come back, and you just hope everybody has access to it, right? Obviously, everybody's wallets are going to be a lot different, but what I think what networks are doing to make sure people have access to what they have access to, you hope everybody has access to it.
Yeah, I think in that regard, it's just going to be a different world. It's just that is so hard to predict. I mean, you see the unemployment numbers, and people. You have family and friends. I have family and friends. I mean, people being furloughed and people losing jobs, and I am a guy that likes to think of. I keep thinking about when the country is able to get released and go and get back to work, and I'm picturing us coming back stronger than ever, and that's just, I'm not pie in the sky. I just, based on I'm 50. In my 50 years, we haven't had a lot of moments in our lives where, I think our parents' generation had a lot of those moments as far as dealing with adversity. We haven't really I mean, 9/11 is an obvious one, but we really haven't had anything, where we've had to really pull together. And I just feel like when you go back all the way to the Great Depression, all the way through, it just seems like what makes this country so unique is when we're going through this, we tend to pull together and then come through it and become stronger and more united. And that's kind of what I'm focusing on. And I think that's where we'll be once we get the medicine, and once we feel like I can go to a game or go to a movie theater or go to a restaurant and not be fearful. I'm picturing people getting their jobs back, and people, coming back with a newfound enthusiasm and passion for all things in life, not just college athletics.
Right. But of course, sports, right? This is the great rallying point that America has, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, and I think that's like the underbelly for those of us who are passionate sports fans. It's made this quarantine so much more challenging. I mean, if you had the NBA playoffs on right now, or you had March Madness on right now, I'm a baseball guy. It'd be like, all right, so we're just gonna hang out. Got a game on tonight, another one on tomorrow. All that just taken away. And so, like I said, I feel personally, I can just tell you how I feel is, man, I've always appreciated that stuff, but I cannot even imagine the next time I'm able to watch a live sporting event. Oh man, I'm gonna have such gratitude for that. I just can't wait.
I'll tell you what I wonder from your perspective. You've throughout your career in broadcasting have talked to a number of players, a number of coaches, a number of just a bunch of people in a bunch of different industries tied to college football. And even as a former player, I wonder how coaches are communicating to their players. I'll have a coach on here in a little bit, but I wonder how coaches are communicating. Like, as a player, you'd probably be looking to coach, like, Coach, what are we going to do? What's happening? I mean, you probably follow the news, but you still look to coach to give you to translate it for me, Coach. What does this mean for us? So I wonder, in terms of the people you've talked to and your perspective of all the relationships you have, what have you heard from those who are, I guess, for the lack of a better word, on the ground?
Yeah, and I think the NCAA has kind of freed up the coaches to have kind of meetings where they can get together. I don't know the exact rules or the specifications of what they're able to do. Maybe when you talk with the coach, he'll be able to tell you. But I know that they're doing a good job. And I don't want to say that they're using Zoom, but some form of Zoom where they're able to communicate and actually look the players and talk with the players. and talk to them about kind of, as you said, your parents and your coach, when you're a college athlete, that's your lifeline, and for probably you and me, your position coach, as much as your head coach, was a big part of your reality, and just trying to make you feel like, okay, here's the news and this is what it means for you. I'm going to simplify it. Here's what you need to do. And that was so invaluable. If you had a great position coach and somebody that helped you be able to just kind of make sense out of things. This is, as we said earlier, this is kind of unprecedented what these coaches are facing. I mean, they right in the middle of spring ball, many of them, as far as football is concerned, and to have that taken away from them, and now they're just trying to, I know with a couple sons on the Clemson team with Dabo, he's had a meeting and talking with the players and had them up, all of them, I don't know, 100 guys maybe on some kind of video conferencing, where he's able to talk to them and kind of message them whatever message he wanted to get across to them. And I know all the position coaches and the coordinators are all doing those same kind of things, just trying to stay in touch and trying to keep these guys focused on, like Dabo said, this thing could be green lighted in a month or 2 months. And I tend to think it will not be, but it might. So, you better be training, you better be doing what you need to do. And you remember being a student athlete, man, I was like a robot. I mean, I had to really grind to get where I eventually became a starter and a captain. But my first 3 years, man, I was lost and struggling, and I just needed some kind of glimmer of hope. And I got that from my position coach and just from working out. But I almost felt like I was in the Marines when I was an athlete, just because I whatever they told me to do. Training table was over at that building. I went over there. Study table was over there. You go to class, you go to lift weights. You're just in such a routine.
What you had to do.
That's it. And so imagine being taken out of that routine. Now you're doing classes online, right? And you're meeting with tutors, on teleconference or video conference, and now you're trying to train the best you can. Some of these guys are quarantined; they don't have a weight room, so they're trying to work with bands or body weight, or it's just such
it's crazy.
very very unusual.
Do
time.
I have the right food at home?
Right?
I mean, am I a household where
Yeah.
the food is the right type of food? I need to put them.
Well, not only that, I mean, a coach told me this. He's like, when I have my players here, I've got them underneath my umbrella, and I know they're getting their meals. I know where they're lifting weights. Like, we're on top of them. They're part of my family. Right now, they're out, and think about what's happening in society. I mean, there are people losing jobs. There are people that are struggling to pay bills, and now you're a coach and you've got a player that's maybe being quarantined in a home where maybe the parents lost their jobs. Maybe they're struggling. They're just trying to get a meal on the table. So there's some things going on. That's where, I mean, I'd love to talk to Mark Emmert or talk to somebody. I wish I had set up a fund or set up something for the college athletes that are right now quarantined in a really tough set of circumstances, to figure a way to get them what they need to make sure, and I'm talking extreme cases where, they don't have access to 3 meals a day. Now that should not happen. And I wish there was a way to identify that, and I would be first in line to chip in to figure out how we can help these guys. Because if I did that right now, I'd probably commit a violation. But I wish there was a way to know who needs help, and I wish we could get them what they need.
Right. I'm sure there are ways. I mean, I guess we just have to do a little research, and each school is probably addressing it if they can afford it, addressing it a different way. So I asked this last question here, Kirk, and I appreciate your time. It's really relative to you being in the media and your colleagues in the arena of football media. What are some of the things you guys, or are you guys just like us and everybody like, well, speculating, or like, how are you guys strategizing the rest of the year for the various outcomes? I mean, in terms of like content and, coming from the big wigs era at ESPN and to you guys as the people out front? Like, tell me about the conversations you're having in terms of trying to strategize and plan with uncertainty of a season or not a season or a late season and all these types of things.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is what we were talking about earlier, just kind of waiting to see what the plan is from the NCAA. In the meantime, I know for me personally, I've talked with some folks at ESPN because they're struggling to have relevant programming on right now that people want to consume. So I've talked with some people about maybe starting to do some kind of, whether it's a podcast or do something, again, the video conferencing you can do with a coach or with a player. And I might just do that on my own social media platforms where I can, have a one-on-one interview with Nick Saban or a one-on-one interview with Mac Brown or whoever it might be. And I thought about that might be something just because it's new content. It's a chance for kind of like what you and I are doing right now. It gives people a chance to hear from people and how they're dealing with these set of circumstances and what their vision is and what they're doing to stay busy and what they're doing to prepare. So I think that might be something I personally look into. Chris Fowler and I had a conversation about that yesterday. Maybe he and I doing some stuff together, again, just for people to give them something to consume. But in the meantime, I think ESPN's they put this Thursday night throwback. I don't think they have it on this week, but typically they're doing a Thursday night kind of a throwback classic college football game. Last week they had the USC Texas game on, the national championship from '06 with Leinart and Bush against Vince Young. And I think they have another one next Thursday that they're going to do. So I think all these different networks are trying to come up with what they think people would want to see. Like I mentioned earlier, MLB Network and NFL Network have been putting a lot of the Super Bowls and different classic games on. It's really all you can do, because in the meantime, all we can do is hope that for the best and hope that we get some good news and that we all can get back to work and doing what we love.
And get to doing what we're doing. Well, Kirk, this has been an excellent conversation. I really appreciate you joining us here on the One Question Leadership Podcast, and hopefully you and your family stay safe down there in Tennessee.
Yeah, same to you, Ty. Great talking to you, bud.
That was Kirk Herbstreit. He is the college football analyst for ESPN. And of course, this is Ty Brown with One Question. And keep in mind, the role of a leader is to create and maintain an environment that people want to be a part of. And as always, be better tomorrow than you are today. This episode of the One Question Leadership Podcast is produced by Spades Media Group, solving problems using creative leadership.